Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Thursday. Guys, we are very blessed and lucky to have Dr. Howard back. This is a reschedule for a live stream we were supposed to do a couple weeks ago, but Howard wasn't feeling well, but he's back in business. He's feeling good. Howard, are you ready to answer some questions today?
I'm ready and eager.
Awesome. Well, for anyone who might be new to this channel or new to Howard, Howard and I have a series of ongoing discussions about just what Trump Derangement Syndrome is, just from a psychological level. Howard is a psychotherapist out in the Los Angeles area. He has written a fabulous book called A Loose Grip, and it gives you lots of insight into the idea of derangement and what it is, because we both agree that it is a very, very real phenomenon. And we've done a series of chats on this channel to that effect. Now, today, what we thought we would do is just kind of open it up for questions. And you guys have sent in a ton of really good questions. And of course, we'll try to take as many questions in the chat that we can as well. But Howard, one of the things that when I put out the call for questions for this conversation, one of the things that I always get is, I don't even want to bother trying to talk to my friends and family members with Trump derangement syndrome. Like, I don't need any advice. I'm just not going to bother. So can you give us some insight into why that might not be the best strategy in the world?
Yeah, by first validating their feelings. I know a lot about the comments that are made when we get into this subject, and a lot of people say, "Gee, why bother? What's the point of talking to a brick wall?" And their instinct is actually correct. But that doesn't. But it doesn't end there. Okay, so this is going to be a difficult thing.
I was like, that wasn't the answer I was hoping for.
I always do that, don't I?
Yes.
No, the instinct is actually correct. It's because, look, I'm a psychotherapist. I can't do my work with people unless they're actually interested in what I have to offer. Unless there are people who actually come to therapy to not get better. And you've got to weed that out. Otherwise, all you're going to be doing is beating your head against that wall. So not everybody, therapy and counseling can do great, but it also can't do anything unless the people who are seeking or say they want to seek your services are open to what the resource is. So in the same way, you can't tell somebody something who doesn't want to hear it. And so that's why I'm validating it. I want them to understand that it is an uphill battle, and their chances are they can do everything right, even with the best kind of communication skills, compassion, and understanding, and still come out in a very unsatisfying way. But now what I said was, but I don't want to stop there. I want to recognize that this is an issue. It's very daunting, but I believe in life you have to be well with yourself, you have to have an open door policy. Today, they're closing the door. I'm going to leave mine open if they want to come in. And there's a percentage of time of times that people who haven't come into that door that you've left open, it could be after a year, it could be after 10 years, it could be after 20 years. They actually come through that door, and they'll tell you, thanks for keeping that door open. So if that's valuable to you, that in other words, it's a heartbreak that you can't get the results you'd like to today. But is it meaningful and valuable to you that maybe someday somebody might open up to where you were at? And that's how I look at it, is to run your life like an open door policy. Maybe not today they'll come through, maybe tomorrow they will.
Mm-hmm. And how I like to think about it too is if I feel like I'm not going to like the outcome, no matter what happens or no matter what I try to do is change the metric of success. I change the definition of what success looks like. And
Absolutely.
so for me, if I was trying to have a conversation with someone like my mother, for example, who has massive TDS, like I can't have my metric of success be, is my mother going to come around today? Because chances are she's probably not, and I've just set myself up for a complete disappointment. But what if I change my metric of success to be, you know what, I want to make sure that I did everything I could so that I can look myself in the mirror and know that I played my part. We are responsible for 50% of every relationship that we have. You are responsible for half of it. I'm responsible for half of it. I've got to do my part. And if I'm not doing my part, then that is on me first and foremost. And so if I can change my metric of success to be like, I'm going to do my part because I want to be able to know emphatically I did everything I could, and whether or not she responds to it is her business, that I think makes it a little bit easier.
That's perfectly said, because, here's the idea. I've got my ideas. I'm going to tell you them. And if I tell you them well enough, you're going to go, wow, aren't you smart? I agree with you. That's a stupid goal. Okay. I mean, it's an understandable goal, but it's not realistic. And it's all I can do to get people to understand that people think differently. They approach issues and problems differently. There's a lot of overlap about how humans think, but there's also just so much diversity about how people approach things, how they frame an issue, how they understand it, what their value set is. I mean, it's a very complex matrix. So the idea that I have a thought, and I've thought it through so well that obviously when I tell you, you're going to go, wow, I agree with that. That's just an absurd idea. Abandon that completely. You should always approach a situation from, I'm not trying to convince this person of what I know and what they ought to know the same way. What I want to do is I want to engage this person in a process of understanding. That's what you're trying to do. That's your goal. If you come away that you don't agree with the person, but you have a measure of understanding that's higher, and if both of you have a measure of understanding that's higher, that is a success.
I definitely agree with that. So we're just going to jump into questions because we have a lot of them. Now, guys, I asked for questions in a couple of different places. We are going to start off by taking questions from my locals community. And I want to start off with locals for a couple of reasons. First off, my locals community is part of the reason that I can spend so much time making content for you guys, and their support is essential for me. It's also just a great place to be on social media. So if you haven't yet joined my locals, the information is in the description below. But Howard, you now have a locals community as well. And I wanted to have a chance for us to talk about what your locals community is and what you're hoping to do there.
Thank you for mentioning it. I felt a little embarrassed the last time I was on. I'm not as sharp on media that you are. You're very, very good. And you know me, I'm not complimenting you. That's an observation. You make a good connection. And so people were asking, so how can they, find me and all that? And I did have a website for my book, but I've now just launched a new website. I've joined the locals, so I'm going to have my own locals channel. And I also write on medium.com. All of these things you introduced me to, by the way. So it's a resource. And what I'm going to do on my community is I'm going to challenge intellect. I don't want to accept what I've been told. I want to process data and information. We go off the rails way too easily. You and I have started a series on derangement, and it's affecting the country as a whole. It's not just affecting an individual. Certainly, you can point to individuals and say, this person's got derangement. We are deranged as a country. We don't think clearly. We buy into things that are absolutely absurd and ridiculous. So what I'm going to attempt to do is break down the components of how to look at things clearly, sensibly. Of course, that will relate to, what your mental health is. Mental health requires that you have good cognitive sensibilities. And we as a country right now are in a mental health crisis. Quite literally, I don't mean to overstate things. I think that's accurate, and it's reflected in the political arena and the election cycle.
hmm So, guys, if that's something you're interested in being a part of, I know I cannot wait. I'm already in it, I think. So, please go and join Howard's local community below. His website is also listed, so all of his information is there. And before we get into questions, I'm just going to go off of Sherry here, guys. Hit the like button if you're happy to have Dr. Howard back on this channel answering your questions. It lets YouTube know that I'm not a channel that they should be banning in any way, shape, or form. And that really helps me out. It makes me happy. So I appreciate that. So smash that like button, guys. All right, Howard, let's jump into questions from my locals community. I just want to make sure I have the most recent list here. Ooh, we got a whole bunch of them. All right. We're going to start off with Lindenbrook. Lindenbrook says the TDSers versus those non-infected seem like both sides are struggling for the higher moral ground. Is there another way to look at this scenario to help us understand it better? If I find someone that actually wants to have a real discussion, I don't think it's a good look to come off as being morally superior, or that my opinions are more right than the opinions the other person might hold. What do you think, Howard?
Yeah, that's a really good premise. One of the things, I mean, this just fits with everything I've been saying, and in my introduction on the locals, I talk about the false and misleading virtue arena. What's happening is you approach an issue with, I'm the one that has a higher moral high ground. I have a moral high ground. You don't. What's wrong with you? So you've just stopped the communication right there. You're done. They've done that with Trump. Part of the essence of Trump derangement is that he's a monster. He's a racist. He's a xenophobe. He's all those kinds of things. So where are you going to go with a conversation? Once you've already said that the person doesn't even have a right to be considered an individual, a person, what are you going to say to this person once you start to attack the morality? Not look, ethics, morals, and values are absolutely critical. But if you start off with, I've got the moral high ground, you don't, so I'm going to now tell you everything that you should think of, and if you don't bend the knee, if you don't bow down, if you don't agree with it, you and I talk a lot about the critical racial theory. I mean, once you're born, whatever skin color that you have, it's done. There is no moraling. You're just born with your morals, either good or bad. So yes, you want to approach the issue not from I'm better than you. You want to approach the issue as I want to understand what your position is. I want to have a grasp of it so that I give it all the consideration. Since you thought of it, I want to consider the things that you've went through to get to the position that you're at.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important that people go into these conversations understanding that you can have a conversation with someone to try to understand their perspective, but that does not mean you have to agree with them. And that is something I've seen come up. Like someone was asking me today on Twitter, I said something about Ben Shapiro, because Ben Shapiro is really not happy that Trump was like opting out of this second virtual debate, whatever. And I responded, I said, all Trump really needs to do is go on Joe Rogan and this like whole election will be over in like a heartbeat. But someone responded to me and said, Carlin, I don't understand how you can push back on Ben Shapiro when you said he was part of your journey of coming out of Trump derangement syndrome. And my response was that I don't need to agree with everything Ben Shapiro says in order to listen to him and to try to understand his perspective. And I feel like that's a lost art in a lot of this is we become so focused on trying to convince other people of our perspective that we haven't taken a moment to say, okay, maybe there are just valid ways to look at the world differently, and it would benefit me as a human being to understand different ways to look at the world.
Yeah, it's I think a critical mistake. I've been in more than a few conversations where it starts off that someone asks me, "What do you think about global warming, global change, climate change?" And right away, what I'm doing is I'm being virtue measured. If I say I believe in it and it's man-made, and if I say all the right things, then I'm they can pass me as a human being and go to the next, whatever just part of the discussion. And so these are virtue tests. And what do you think about what Ben Shapiro said? Well, if they're curious, that's fine. But if it's a virtue test, then it's a problem. What do you think about gun control? What do you think about the abortion issue? What do you think about, people will ask those questions in the beginning to test you as to, your virtue level. And of course, if you don't pass the test, then you'll be canceled, and then there won't be any curiosity about why you may think something. Carlin, you just said something a while ago, and I liked it. And you said, gee, I didn't expect that answer from you. I think you've said that more than a few times when you've asked me a question. Okay, but because you're not testing me on my virtue, I mean, we've never had that.
Right.
What you are is you're curious, and now I've given you another doorway to think about something that you may not have thought before. Mm-hmm. Do you think that thought innovation comes when you would be open to hearing something that you hadn't looked at that way before? And the whole of my work that I've ever done is I always strive to look for the doorway or the entry that nobody's ever gone through before. I value that. I think certainly I can go through a doorway and it doesn't get me where I thought I might go, but I'm willing to try it. And when I engage people, I'm asking them, you want to look at a doorway? Have you ever thought of this before? And maybe I mess with people's mind. My wife would say something like, oh my God, I forgot. And I said, no, you remembered.
I
And
love that.
And yeah, right. And so I'm always, if you know me, I'm always looking for other doorways. Now, if that bothers you, you're not going to want to talk to me. You're going to want me to always go through the same doorway in the same way and check off the boxes. And I guess I'm inviting people to consider other people's pathways, other people's doorways. It may show you more about yourself than you would otherwise wouldn't understand. And so I consider those things valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things, and we're going to move on to the next question here, but I think this is an interesting point. I think one of the things that's helped me to remain open and curious of other people's perspectives is really practicing mindfulness very much in my daily life, which I have done for years and years and years. I wrote a whole book about mindfulness at work. And one of the principles that is foundational to my mindfulness practice is practicing non-judgment. Not looking at something and immediately saying, oh, this is the best thing ever, or oh, this is the worst thing ever. And I think that's one of the worst things that people can do. And it's almost automatic when you're not being mindful of it, is we instantly make these judgments about things as being good or bad. And that judgment is going to directly dictate how you respond to that thing. If you judge something as bad or wrong, or you judge this person as an evil person because they don't agree with you on environmental policy or something like that, you're going to have a very different reaction than if you're just like, okay, well, this is your position. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. Let's explore why that is. And so mindfulness for me, I think, was probably one of the key things that got me out of Trump Derangement Syndrome, because I was really evolving in how I was perceiving other people's positions on things.
Well, you know what you just touched on? You touched on that the core of that has to do with insecurity. If I'm secure in what I understand and know, I'm not going to become insecure because you've told me something different than what I thought of. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at that as an opportunity to either, you know what, I never thought about it that way. I feel comfortable to abandon what I was thinking because you made a compelling issue, or I can add to it so that my ideas are more refined, or what you say to me isn't so compelling and I'm still good with what I've been thinking. So if I'm insecure, I'm going to feel, when you bring up a different way of looking at something, my insecurity is going to cause me to be judgmental. And how dare you? I mean, it has to, because it causes a crisis. That's another component of the derangement, is they don't want to be confronted with the ideas that you have, because now where do they go with that? They'll disintegrate. Now, of course, they don't have to, but they've cornered themselves in such a position. They've created such cognitive dissonance that it creates a crisis when you say something like, yeah, I can see what people say about Trump, but when I hear him, he doesn't sound so bad. That they don't hear that. They just hear, oh my God, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to live to my next moment? Because I was tied to the idea that this guy's a monster. And somebody just said, I thought they were a human being, said, I don't know, I like what Trump said. That causes a crisis for these people, as opposed to, I don't agree with him, but oh well,